Good afternoon, I'm Katie Wilson and you're watching Context. Following unprecedented US strikes on Iran's three most significant nuclear sites, Iran has vowed retaliation. Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei has promised to punish Israel, while President Pezeshkian declared that the Americans must receive a response to their aggression. President Trump says the strikes caused monumental damage to Iranian nuclear sites, whilst the UN's nuclear watchdog has called for a ceasefire in order to inspect the damage. So what do we know so far about the US strikes on three Iranian nuclear sites? Well, the newly released US timeline confirms that during the operation, dubbed Midnight Hammer, B-2 stealth bombers dropped bunker-busting munitions on Fordo and Natanz, while Isfahan was struck by Tomahawk missiles. Due to Fordo's depth deep below ground, only the US has the kind of bunker-buster bomb big enough to penetrate the site. On social media, President Trump has speculated about the possibility of leadership change in Iran, hours after his team said replacing the Iranian government was not the aim of the strikes. Joining us now to unpack the latest developments is political commentator Adam Stott-Bellos. Thank you for being with us. Now, let's start by unpacking this social media post from Trump where he talks about making Iran great again. Do you think this is Trump's place to say such a thing, or could it be counterproductive?
Thank you for having me. First, I definitely think it is President Trump's place to say something like that, given the fact that the regime itself tried to assassinate him twice. It's very clear that President Trump is working for the stability of the Middle East, and the Iranian regime currently is working against the stability of the Middle East. So it's only natural that somebody in Trump's position would begin to suggest regime change after the bombing of the three nuclear sites.
Do you think Iran is still a potential nuclear threat to Israel?
Absolutely not. But I will say this. I do think that there are many things that we don't know. Would like to know where their nuclear material is and if it was removed, given the prior notice that I guess you could say the week leading up to these attacks were. And I do think that Iran has sleeper cells all around the world. So I don't necessarily think it's a nuclear threat to Israel, but I do think that the regime is still a threat to Jews around the world.
And how are Israelis feeling now on the streets? Is there any concern about potential retaliation?
I mean, I was woken up twice. I think people are very tired, given the disruption pattern. Businesses have been shut down, given the fact that not everybody is out. It's not hustle and bustle like the normal, I guess you could say, day in television. At the same time, people are trying to go about living their lives and having some sense of normalcy. But there is a little bit more tension in the air in terms of these are not smaller style rockets coming from Gaza. Large intercontinental ballistic missiles that are destroying buildings if there's a direct hit. Only about 10% of Iran's intercontinental ballistic missiles have kind of gotten through our defenses. So when you hear the sirens, you know, it's not like when the Houthis were firing on us where 99% of the missiles intercepted. Everybody is taking it very seriously. The damage is much more devastating. And it is somewhat crippling the country, but not in the most extreme sense of the term, if that makes sense.
So obviously you're mentioning there the extent of the damage. It's something that Israel hasn't experienced from the Houthis or from Gaza. So how sustainable do you think it is for Israel to keep attacking Iran, given that you are experiencing this retaliation?
So if you let's compare like the type of devastation that we've seen in Yemen from U.S. and Israeli attacks, Lebanon and Gaza. It is on a scale of 1 to 10. I would say what we're experiencing is a 1, and what they've experienced is an 11. So it's a very different type of devastation. I wouldn't even call it devastation. I would call it destruction, inconvenience, a lack of total security versus total security. But this is a very sustainable situation for at least a few more weeks at minimum. I don't think it's great for our economy. At the same time, the Tel Aviv stock market has skyrocketed given the fact that most people do believe the Iranian regime needs to be replaced in order for the stability of the Middle East to return. So I don't want to, I think one of the big things that's happening on social media is that they're blowing out of proportion what's going on in Israel, especially from the pro-Palestinian, pro-Iranian regime or pro-Islamic Republic side of social media.
But there has
I think they're
been
trying to make it
calls
seem
for
as if the damage
restraint
that they're
from the
inflicting.
international community, hasn't there? What do you make of those?
There's been calls for restraint. Yeah, I mean, there's been calls for restraint from the international community on us since October 8th, before we did our ground invasion. I also find it very interesting that nobody has condemned Iran targeting civilian structure and a hospital that was not used as an army base,
but there has been
unlike
calls,
hospitals that were targeted in Gaza.
There has been calls for a ceasefire.
Right. So, I mean, at this point, Israelis do not take the opinion of the international community very seriously, given the lack of respect that was very much shown to Israel after October 7th, also to its female victims, also to the lack of
So where does that leave Israel when it comes to negotiating and when it comes to finding a solution to this? If Israel doesn't have that respect for the international...
The solution is a regime change. Yeah, the solution is regime change, and I think the best thing for the Iranian people is regime change. And I think it's very important to understand that the government that we are in a war with, not the people, the government, the Islamic, is the most dangerous government on earth and is the destabilizer of the Middle East and is the largest sponsor of terror around the world. So as the German chancellor said at the G7 summit, we're doing the world's dirty work right now. So, I mean, I think that a lot of statements are being made, but I think that's all they are. I think they are just statements. I think that what Israel provides to the rest of the world, given what the Iranian regime provides to the rest of the world, the scale is quite unbalanced in terms of good versus evil.
So can you see Netanyahu come to a negotiating table after all of this?
I do not think the Iranian regime will be in existence to come to the negotiating table. I believe the goal of all of this is regime change. I do not believe the regime will be standing in another 30 days.
But now that wasn't what Washington, obviously we have had this social media post from Trump, but previously that wasn't what Washington was saying. Mm-hmm. So what do you make of that?
Right. I mean, previously Washington was saying, in my opinion, this was the greatest effort of political theater seen on display in politics in the last 500 years. I think that anything that is said, 5 days ago, or 4 days ago, President Trump said he wanted to wait 2 weeks till he decided what to do. 48 hours or 24 hours later, he bombed the 3 nuclear sites. So I don't think statements should be taken at their face value at this time. And I think it's time to see how the world leaders play with each other in the sandbox of public diplomacy and geopolitics and conflict. Time. I think the mainstream media took the bait of trying to say that the United States and Israel's relationship had chilled, and really what we were seeing again was some amazing political theater in order to throw the world off of what both Israel and the United States were planning together in terms of destabilizing the Middle East and bringing the Middle East into a reality and allowing Iranians to hopefully very soon live with the same types of freedoms and liberties that Israelis do.
Now, you're right that I think Trump is firmly in Israel's corner by carrying out these attacks. But from the Iranian perspective, Iran's foreign minister has said it wasn't Iran but the US who betrayed diplomacy, and Iran considered these previous diplomatic efforts that we saw from the US. Iran is seeing those as deception. So, what do you make of that view? Do they have a point?
So I don't believe that's the Iranian point of view. I believe that's the Islamic Republic's point of view, and I think that's very important to differentiate. I am a firm believer that the Islamic Republic is the occupier of the Iranian people, and that they have hijacked their culture, country. Also, the Iranian government, the Islamic Republic, was given 60 days to negotiate and come to terms with the United States. On day 61, this war, well, really this stage of war began, because it's been since October 7th. So I don't understand how they were betrayed if they didn't come to terms with the terms that were given to them. They're a much smaller country. They do not have as large of a military as the United States. They don't have as large of a military as Saudi Arabia. So, you know, there's been a lot of but no action from Iran in order to actually successfully retaliate. And I think it was a very poor geopolitical move for them to not come to terms with the United States as quickly as possible. The fact that they tried to assassinate President Trump once before, if not twice before.
Let's talk more about that retaliation. You mentioned that retaliation there. So Iran is still a big regional player here. So how would the US react if Iran starts targeting bases in the Gulf as retaliation?
Well, I think if they were going to do that, they would have done that right after their nuclear sites were attacked. And instead, they attacked Israel. If Iran is shaking in their boots, there's calls to replace the supreme leader. I do not think that Iran has the strength that they, or many people, think they have.
So how concerned are you about that retaliation? Because the Iranian government has vowed retaliation and has always vowed retaliation.
The Iranian government has also said that they would wipe Israel off the map. And we're still standing here.
So tensions are at their highest now. And in your view, what is going to happen next?
Personally, I believe that there will be a change of governor in Iran. I believe we'll see that over the next few weeks. I do not foresee a successful retaliation towards Israel or the United States unless they use dirty bombs. And I'd be very concerned if that was the case. That is my biggest fear, using nuclear material, not necessarily a nuclear bomb. So I think we have to wait and see what's going to happen. But they have so far unsuccessfully crippled the Israeli economy, crippled Israeli infrastructure, or crippled Israeli society. They've gotten a couple of intercontinental ballistic missiles through. They have hit civilian areas. They have hit civilian infrastructure. But this country is very far from being crippled.
In you're talking about a matter of weeks for a regime change. What would that look like in view? Is that something that could happen diplomatically, or is that happening through a continuation of this war?
Well, I think it'll depend on whether or not the army wants to back the current regime. The Shah's descendants, his son, has put in place a transition plan that he's made public as well. I'd be very interested to see what type of government would emerge after this. I hope it would be some type of constitutional monarchy, similar to maybe what England has, with the Shah's family playing the role of what the royal family in England. Obviously, you know, being in Israel, we're firm believers of democracy and the importance of democracy. At the same time, as we've seen since the Arab Spring, it's very clear that in the Middle East, one democracy works, and outside of that, mostly monarchies are able to function and sustain themselves in the Middle East. It's a little different from the Western world. At the same time, we obviously want to see every single person in Iran share in the same liberties that most people in the 21st century do take for granted.
And would that be achieved through an escalation of this war? Many would say that that is a bit counterintuitive.
I think we're looking at the entire situation differently. I don't understand what the nation of this would be other than disintegration of the current regime. They are unable to successfully attack us. They have tried now for weeks. Every single attack that they have perpetrated on Israel has been unsuccessful. Hezbollah was dismantled in under a month.
But there's been significant damage, hasn't there?
The reason why October was as devastating as it No, and I've already said there've been a few infrastructure damages to one hospital in the south and residential buildings, but no, that is incorrect. There has not been major infrastructure damage in Israel.
Compared to what you've seen previously?
And there is not major infrastructure damage in Israel at all. This country is functioning just fine at this time. It's obviously very annoying to have to run into bomb shelters, but it's really no different than what we've seen, except for the last 2 years, except for the fact that these missiles are much larger. But again, defense systems are quite sustainable, so to speak. So I think the devastation that we're seeing out of Iran and the images that we're seeing in Tehran and the rest of Iran are much more devastating, and the country is in a much different situation than Israel is at this time. Our entire military leadership is still intact, theirs is not.
And how do you think the Iranian public would, as you say, the regime and the Iranian public are different things, but if they are experiencing this damage, how do you think they would react to negotiating with Israel, with the United States? Is escalating this conflict a solution?
So I mean, I've seen images of Iranians dancing in the street. Obviously, there are a significant amount of collaborators in Iran with the Iranian people have been, under the thumb of the Islamic Republic for more than 40 years, almost 50 years. And I think it's very clear that the Iranian people would like a change of regime. I think it's very clear that many people understand the need for this to happen. Sometimes war must take place for something better to come afterwards. You don't make peace with friends, you make peace with your enemies. And if you can't make peace with your enemies, you replace your enemies.
Thank you for joining us on the programme. It was great to have you with us. Now, that brings this...
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Now, that brings this edition of Context to a close, as US strikes mark a significant escalation in the ongoing war between Iran and Israel. Attacks are still continuing. Israel carried out one of the most intense attacks on Iran's military infrastructure overnight in a fresh series of strikes towards Tehran this morning, according to its military. Meanwhile, around 8,000 people in Israel are without electricity following Iran's missile strikes this morning, according to the Energy Minister. We'll keep bringing you the latest developments here on AnewZ. Thank you for watching. Bye for now.